Since the first human being opened their eyes on this earth, they looked up. Not at the trees, not at the ground beneath their feet. They looked up at something they could not name, could not touch, could not fully explain. And in that moment, before language, before civilization, before science, they felt it. Something is here. Something made this. Something knows my name. This is not a religious film. This is not a film asking you to abandon your reason. This is a film asking you to use it, fully, honestly, and without fear, to follow the evidence wherever it leads. These are 10 arguments for the existence of God, drawn from Islamic scholarship, from history, from science, and from the deepest corridors of the human experience. If you have ever doubted, if you have ever wondered, if you have ever lain awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling asking, is there anything out there? Imagine two children, born on opposite sides of the earth. They will never meet. They share no language, no culture, no history. They have never seen the same book or heard the same story. Yet both of them independently look at the sky and say the same thing. Someone made this. This is not a coincidence. This is not conditioning. This happened across every continent, in every era, among people separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. With no airplanes, no postal systems, no means of communication whatsoever. Islam and Christianity, Hinduism and Zoroastrianism, the Aboriginal tribes of Australia and the ancient civilizations of the Americas. Separated by everything, united by one conclusion. There is a creator. When diverse minds, in isolation, reach an identical truth, that is not religion, that is evidence. The same way every culture independently discovered fire, independently discovered mathematics, independently discovered that the sun rises in the east, they independently discovered God. You have never been to Tokyo, but you believe it exists. Why? Because people you trust have told you so. Travelers, journalists, geographers, you accept their testimony without demanding you go there yourself. Now consider this. Abraham left his family and his home for a God he could not show anyone. Moses stood before the most powerful ruler on earth and said, "I have spoken with God," knowing it might cost him his life. Jesus endured persecution and suffering for a truth he refused to abandon. Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave up wealth, comfort, family, and safety, not for power, not for fame, but for a message he said came from beyond this world. These were not weak men. These were not foolish men. These were individuals of extraordinary character, whose integrity even their enemies acknowledged. And they all said the same thing. I have met God. He is real. He sees you. We accept the word of a travel writer about a city. We accept the testimony of a scientist about a particle we cannot see. But we hesitate to accept the unanimous first-hand witness of the most morally extraordinary human beings who ever lived. They had nothing to gain from lying, and everything to lose from telling the truth. No one taught you that betrayal feels wrong. No one sat you down as a child and explained why a lie leaves a residue in your chest. No one programmed into you the shame that follows cruelty, or the quiet satisfaction that follows kindness. It was already there. Every human being, regardless of religion, regardless of culture, regardless of whether they believe in God at all, carries within them what Islamic scholarship calls the self-accusing soul. An internal judge, a conscience that speaks even when no one else is watching. Where did it come from? Evolution can explain survival. It cannot explain why a soldier throws himself on a grenade to save strangers. It cannot explain why a dying man confesses a secret that costs him everything. It cannot explain why guilt exists at all in a universe that, without God, has no moral ledger to answer to. The conscience is not an accident. It is a message, written not on paper, but on the human soul itself, from the one who created it. Everything you have ever seen began somewhere. The chair you are sitting on was built. The city outside your window was constructed. The body you inhabit grew from a single microscopic cell, itself the product of two people, who were themselves the product of two more, stretching back through an unbroken chain of causes into the ancient darkness of history. But here's the question that science has never fully answered. Where did the first cause come from? You cannot have an infinite chain of causes going backwards forever. At some point, the chain must begin. Something must have existed that was itself uncaused. Something that always was, that needed nothing to create it, that stood outside of time itself. That is not a religious statement. That is a logical necessity. The universe did not create itself. The nothing from which science says everything emerged cannot have produced everything without something behind it, because nothing produces nothing, unless something eternal, uncaused, and all-powerful existed first. That is what the human mind, when pushed to its absolute limit, arrives at. Not religion, not faith, logic. Your eye contains 137 million light-sensitive cells. It adjusts automatically to darkness and light, focuses across distances in milliseconds, and processes 10 million colors. It also perfectly matches the wavelength of sunlight, the specific type of light that exists on this planet. That is not a coincidence. That is a correspondence, a design. Your lungs are built for oxygen. Your eyes are built for light. The camel's body is built for the desert, with a neck long enough to reach water, a hump that stores energy for weeks, eyelids that close against sandstorms. The lion has claws precisely suited for hunting. The bird has hollow bones precisely suited for flight. If you threw paint randomly at a canvas every day for 1,000,000 years, you would never produce the Mona Lisa. But the universe, infinitely more complex than any painting, emerged from random chance. The probability that the precise physical constants of this universe, the exact strength of gravity, the exact charge of an electron, the exact rate of expansion after the Big Bang, all landed by accident in the narrow range that permits life, has been calculated by physicists as effectively zero. This was not random. This was written. And writing requires a writer. His name was Ramesses. His name was Nebuchadnezzar. His name was Nimrod. His name was Caesar. They stood before their people and said, "I am God. There is no power above mine." Where are they now? History has a pattern that is impossible to ignore. Those who claim ultimate power, who place themselves above accountability, above morality, above any higher authority, eventually fall. Not sometimes, every time. The Quran speaks of Pharaoh, the most powerful man on earth in his era, who pursued Moses and his people to the edge of the sea, and was swallowed by it. His body, preserved by the very salt water that destroyed him, was discovered in the 19th century. It lies in a museum in Cairo to this day, a sign, as the Quran itself says, for those who come after. No atheist empire has ever built what faith built. No civilization founded on the denial of God has produced a lasting legacy of justice, beauty, and meaning. Because a world without God is a world without ultimate accountability. And power, without accountability, always destroys itself. History is not just a record of the past, it is a warning. Moses had no army. He had a staff and a message. Muhammad, peace be upon him, began with 15 people in a desert city surrounded by enemies who wanted him dead. Within 23 years, the entire Arabian Peninsula had transformed, not through conquest alone, but through a revolution of the human heart. This pattern repeats across every messenger in history. They begin with nothing. They are mocked, persecuted, exiled, threatened. The odds against them are not just unfavorable, they are impossible. And yet, they win. Not because they were stronger, not because they were wealthier, but because, as history consistently shows, the truth, when carried by those willing to die for it, cannot be permanently silenced. If these messengers were liars, history should have buried them. Instead, billions of human beings, centuries and millennia later, still follow their teachings. Lies do not survive that long. Only truth does. There are things that medicine cannot explain. Not because medicine is inadequate, but because what happened should not have happened, according to every known law of biology and probability. Tumors that vanished overnight, patients declared terminal who walked out of hospitals, recoveries from conditions that carry a 0% survival rate in the medical literature. And in case after case, when you ask the person what happened in the hours or days before, they say the same thing. I prayed. I had never prayed like that before in my life. I let go of everything, and I asked. This is not anecdote. Across cultures, across religions, across centuries, human beings in their most desperate moments have called out to something beyond themselves, and something answered. God does not hide from those who genuinely seek Him. He manifests His existence precisely in the moments when human power has completely run out, because only then are we finally quiet enough to hear. "1,400 years ago, in the middle of the desert, a man described the future. He spoke of a time when camels would be abandoned in favor of something faster and more powerful, and railways replace them. He spoke of a time when knowledge would be spread to every corner of the earth at unprecedented speed, and the printing press arrived. He spoke of a time when distant people would communicate as if they were in the same room, and the internet was born. These were not vague prophecies open to any interpretation. These were specific, verifiable, and fulfilled. The Quran speaks of the preservation of Pharaoh's body as a sign for future generations, at a time when no one knew his mummy existed, or that it would one day be found. How does a man in 7th century Arabia know what the 19th and 21st centuries will look like? There is only one explanation that holds. He was told. By the one who exists outside of time, who sees the end from the beginning, who knows what has not yet happened, because he is the reason it will. Every argument in this film has been external, historical, logical, scientific. But the final proof is personal. God does not hide from those who look for Him with sincerity. This is His promise. Not a religious slogan, but a claim that can be tested. The sources of Islamic scholarship suggest something extraordinary. That any human being, regardless of their past, regardless of their doubts, who prostrates before God with a pure heart, who genuinely, desperately, honestly asks to be shown the truth, will be answered. Not maybe, not sometimes, will be answered. This is not blind faith. This is an experiment, and the results across 14 centuries, across every culture and every language, have been consistent. People who were certain God did not exist, who approached this experiment with skepticism and intellectual honesty, came back changed. Not because they were weak, not because they were desperate, but because they were honest enough to look. You do not have to believe tonight. You do not have to abandon your questions. You only have to be willing to ask, with everything you have, to the silence around you. Science looks outward and finds a universe of staggering precision and beauty that it cannot fully explain. History looks backward and finds a pattern of truth outlasting every attempt to destroy it. And the human soul looks inward and finds something it did not put there. A longing, a conscience, a question that will not go away. Is anyone there? Across every culture, across every century, across every language ever spoken on this earth, the answer that has come back is the same. Yes, and I have always known your name.